Yo, 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 hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World. Now back live on LinkedIn. I didn't realize the last broadcast didn't actually broadcast on LinkedIn because apparently I had to re enter my credentials. So there you go. But welcome to VUX World. Thank you for stopping by. My name's Kane Sims, as I said, and I'd like to give a shout out to our presenting sponsor, Deepgram. Deepgram, if you don't know already, is industry standard speech recognition technology. Deepgram's APIs enable you to put speech recognition, state of the art speech recognition, into any kind of application that you so desire, whether you're transcribing calls in your call center, whether you're transcribing meetings and trying to take and summarize actions, whether you are building voice assistants and voice bots, voice enabling products, adding voice dictation capabilities into products or voice enabler apps, anything that you need to understand speech for or take spoken audio and turn it into text, Deepgram is the place to go for that. They've got incredibly quick response times, which is obviously important when you're working with these kind of systems. They allow you to retrain your models, which means that you can create speech recognition models for your specific use cases, which gives you a greater, higher accuracy, which means that you're feeding your NLU with better data if you're building voice assistants. And it is generally cost effective. So do check out deepgram.com if you are looking for more information. That's deepgram.com/VUX World for more information. We're also actually running a webinar with Deepgram next week, actually. And it's going to be all about the irony of big tech and why some of the big companies that you will think of when you think about AI don't always innovate as fast as you might think or in the right areas as you might want them to. Even though you might think they do, and you'll see the events that they run every year telling you that things are improving, the reality is that their approach is often quite slow and transient, where there'll be a blip of activity and then nothing for months. Whereas a company such as Deepgram, for argument's sake, has a constant innovation cycle. And we're going to be getting into me and Adam Sipniewski, who's the CTO of Deepgram. They're going to be getting into this conversation about why the big tech companies don't innovate as often as you might think, how to audit your current speech recognition capabilities, how to understand where you can make improvements, the difference between a general ASR model versus a customized model, and the business value that using each can bring. There's going to be a whole bunch of content in there helping you figure out how to use speech recognition to the best that you possibly can. Whether you're building voice assistants, transcribing calls in your call center, there's going to be content for that whole thing, all of your use cases. So please do join us on June next Thursday. And the link to that, if you go to vux.world, click on the events link, and you will find the sign up form just there. So there we go. Without further ado, though, let us welcome our guest for today, Timo Kunz, who is the CEO of Aflorithmic. Welcome, Timo.
Hey, Kane, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, likewise, likewise. Appreciate you spending the time with us. It's gonna be interesting. Whereabouts are you right now?
So normally I'm London-based. However, we have an office in Barcelona. So this week
Nice,
I'm in sunny Barcelona.
wicked. So you've exchanged the rain and clouds in London for the sun and blue skies in Barcelona.
It's 24 degrees. We're going to the beach tomorrow with the team in the afternoon. So yeah.
Nice, nice, nice. Yeah, thank you for making me feel better about my situation. Cool. Well, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this conversation because Aflorithmic is a very interesting company working in a very interesting space. We've had, I would say, not similar companies, but similar in a sense of companies that are not kind of necessarily building voice assistants, but using AI when you apply it to audio in order to do something special. You know, we've had Trinity Audio on in the past, we've had Instreamatic on in the past, Audio Burst as well. All companies who are doing some really interesting things, applying AI into the audio creation space, which is what you're doing as well. So I'm really interested to get in this conversation. So yeah, it'd be nice to learn a little bit about yourself first of all, and what kind of led you to Aflorithmic.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, cool. Let's start with this. Yeah, so actually my background is in AI. So I did a PhD in Lancaster, actually in the UK. Now a long time ago. However, I've also been a musician all my life. So of course, only on the side and improv sound engineer as one is. And yeah, I knew there would be this magic point in time in the history of universe when those two worlds would come together. And actually, that was in 2018, 2019, text to speech made a humongous step change. There was a new architecture, and when I heard this, I knew exactly that this was the time. Now, text to speech is amazing, but this is not the only innovation that happens. So nowadays, what you can actually do with AI in audio production in a broader sense, right? So from mastering to AI music to arrangement to also like mangling copy into a format that it plays nicely with text to speech. But then also, if you think about like versioning audio and so on. So I found this hugely inspiring, and this is actually why we started Aflorithmic. So it's pretty much with the vision of actually using all these new cool tools and putting them to good news.
Nice, nice. And how would you describe Aflorithmic to somebody who'd never heard of it before?
Yeah, it's a rather technical product. So I'll start with the technical, or I start with the complex first, and then give you some use cases. So we're pretty much on a mission of making audio production scalable. Yeah. So we pretty much built a production chain which actually covers the entire audio production process, right? So normally, when I tell people, like, the first thing they think about is text to speech, that's very obvious. However, it's actually much further than this, or it goes much further than this, because if you think about text to speech, you only have speech, right? And how often in life do you actually listen to recorded speech? I mean, this is a good example, but you had music and a jingle at the beginning, right? And there were effects on this production, and later there might even be a mastering component that cleans it all up and so on. So what we are actually doing, we pretty much make this entire production chain available. So we make it possible to go from text, or to actually get text into a format that it plays nicely with text to speech. Then actually to go text to speech, we are voice vendor agnostic. So that actually means we integrate all different kinds of voice vendors into our platform. We can also clone voices ourselves if we must. So we can clone your voice or voice actor's voice. But then, and that's more where our magic sauce sits, so we actually have algorithms then that actually can pick up that speech meaningfully, pretty much mix it, and pretty much emulate what you would normally do as a sound engineer in a studio. And then later even do the post-production bit. So we have a very scalable mastering engine that then actually spins up and makes it sound really nice. And to finish all of this off, we actually also want to make sure you get that audio somewhere where it actually matters. When that, it can be an advertiser network. If it's an audio ad, it could be a podcast, even it could be something you want to just like share outside. It could go into an IoT device. So there are many use cases for this. So very technical description. To make it even worse, we are API first. So the product is actually called API.audio. So it means actually it allows developers actually to build applications with it. But let me also now give you a couple of concrete examples where it is used. So for example, video, the amount of video produced in this world is exploding. You can already pretty much automate pretty efficiently the creation of video. Yeah. However, actually, normally these videos do not have a voiceover. And why is that? Because automating audio to the same extent isn't solved yet. Yeah. So what you can actually do, what video platforms can do with our technology, you can actually pretty much either, let's say, generate a SRT file, so that's a subtitle file, or you can actually just have your user give you a script in a text box. And then actually we do not only translate this to speech, but we actually embed it in an entire audio production so that it sounds at the end very close to a professional voiceover that would actually get from a production studio. Yeah. Another example is advertising. So if you think about all the audio ads now that are out there, audio ads are not A/B testable at the moment, just because it's prohibitive of the amount of time and resources you would spend. So what you can do with our technology, you can not only go from text to fully produced audio ad that you can play, but also you can just absolutely within the possible, like, create 1,000 different versions of this ad, and optimize one for the country channel, one for the EDM crowds, and maybe have a female voice and a voice with an accent, and a male voice and a but also do it in German and in French, and so on and so forth. And just to give you one third example, so we also do a lot in also content we call it content repurposing. So pretty much if a publisher has some sort of written content, and actually they want to produce a podcast with it, then actually we can translate it into a podcast, and it will not only be text to speech, it will actually sound like a proper podcast. By proper podcast, I mean it will have a jingle, it will have transitions, it will sound quite nice. However, I also must say there are clear limits to it. So at the moment, what works well in the space is snack size content. So it's something that's very current, very repetitive. You maybe update benefits from being updated every day, or even personalized, and is very short, maybe a minute or two, right? So it wouldn't be suitable to pretty much record this podcast, or like have a conversation, or also have a humorous component to it.
Interesting. There's a hell of a lot to unpack in all of that there. Where to start? I mean, when you explain about it and you say it's API first, it kind of makes me think that the it makes me think of something like Twilio or Vonage, where in order to use it, you need to have, definitely some technical skills to be able to use the APIs and stuff like that. And then I'm hearing you talk about audio production and mastering, and that latter example with jingles and transitions and stuff like that. Then typically the way that's done now is that a human will listen to it and think, well, okay, well, the jingle will stop here, and then after the first part here, we'll put the transition there because that's the end of that piece of content. And then it requires a human to kind of go through that. And for those who have not got experience with digital audio workstations and stuff like that, typically what will happen is you have some software that will have multiple different channels on it, rows basically, and you'll have different audio files and you'll link them all together. And so on the one hand, I start to think, well, it kind of, I'm thinking it should be or it will look something like a digital audio workstation, probably through a browser. But then you're talking about it being AI first and API first, rather. So then it leads me to think that it's going to be something more like a Twilio or Vonage kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which of it is it, or is it kind of a mixture of the two?
Yeah, correct. So it definitely requires tech skills to build with. Yeah. So we don't have an end consumer tool. We don't have a front end. We don't have anyone that let's say non-technical user could log into and play with or do something meaningful with. Yeah. However, so I always describe it with like a bit of the move from like back in the days when you needed pretty much a developer, designer, and so on to create a website, to then to WordPress, or actually in the graphic space, I think the same thing happened with Canva. So you are right. Like normally, high quality audio is created through a so-called DAW, so a digital audio workstation. Like some people might know, I don't know, Logic or Reason or Reaper or whatever. And this is a very, very high skilled affair, right? So you really need to know what you're doing. It's definitely for expert users. Yeah. And I hope that always will be this way, because it's fun and I like these things as well. Yeah. But you have the vast majority wouldn't know what to do with it. Yeah. However, now actually think that you are in a tool like, for example, a video builder. So you have video builder where people, for example, drag and drop their slides and it makes a video, or they drag and drop some pictures and it makes a little video for social. Yeah. And those are maybe marketeers. There may be private people doing a video wedding invitation, or doing anything in that space, or maybe a DCO platform that actually then wants to allow a marketeer to version their asset for TikTok and for Facebook and so on, right? So these people normally, they are not interested in learning learning anything to that level where they could operate a DAW. Yeah. And this is exactly the hole that this fills. So all these platforms that I just mentioned, for them it would be very worth to integrate API.audio. They can give their users, for example, a text box. Yeah. Of course, you don't have you forego a lot of the flexibility a sound engineer wants, right? So for example, if you then say, oh, that compressor, I don't like it, or it needs to be more aggressive, or and like that reverb right here, or I would put the transition a bit here and there. So that's not the point, right? It's in the same way with WordPress. You pull up a template in this case, and then actually you fill out your fields and you get a meaningful website. So this is the equivalent, right? So most of these video websites, for example, they work with templates somehow. So you can, for example, give us the transitions that you go from a, let's say, an intro to a main part after 10 seconds, and actually our engine makes sure that there's a meaningful build up at the beginning, and then actually there's some sort of in the audio, it really, that is the main where the main of your presentation starts, or of your video starts. And that's really when people hear video without a soundtrack. Of course, everybody dislikes that anyways. Most videos maybe have a stock music track underneath that doesn't have anything, that just doesn't sound that nice, or doesn't really fit what's on the screen. However, if you can then actually, without a mic and without actually, a multi-day production process, you can actually then create a fully produced voiceover just by writing text. That's very powerful, right? And then if you throw in the versioning capability of saying, let's create that audio asset in 10 different ways, or maybe even a thousand. Once it says hi Kane, once it says hi Timo, or it has your company name in it, or whatever you want. Then actually that also opens up these use cases that you just cannot do. Like even with even if you would go through the process of having a speaker that would actually voice all of this, and then have a sound engineer that would go through the trouble of doing all the production elements of it.
Interesting. So it's mainly will be part of another tool that in that example there, something like a Canva, where you can build a video template and select, input your text that you wanted to say, feed it off into the API. You'll then do your fancy stuff, apply the compression, clean it up, assign a voice to it, that kind of thing, and send back the kind of finished audio. Am I understanding that right?
Exactly, and
Yeah.
the user wouldn't know any of this. Yeah, all
Yeah.
that the user is actually seeing, they type text. Normally they select a voice. We make it very easy to select voices, because there are hundreds and soon thousands. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we want to make it easy for you to find the right voice to go with it, and then actually you can select what we call a sound design. So that's not a stock music track. It's actually a collection of audio assets that can be dynamically arranged by our algorithms. And then actually, you're more or less good to go. It's a press of a button. We rendered a couple of seconds, and then you have your voiceover.
Interesting. And how do you kind of determine? I mean, this might be kind of secret sauce territory, but as a kind of fellow ex-musician, I'm kind of always interested in how this sort of stuff's working.
Yeah.
How are you determining what kind of effects to apply and where? Like, so you mentioned there that some of those DAW systems, digital audio workstations, they kind of require skills to use. Certain, you need to know kind of what you're doing. However, there is some kind of hacks that you can use. So, for example, for me, one of my kind of little hacks is that if I was when I edit this conversation we're having now, I mean, your audio is pretty clean, but sometimes someone will be recording into a laptop mic, and there's some little tricks that I'll use to try and isolate the bad frequencies in their audio, which is
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of use the EQ, really kind of focus it in on a narrow frequency band range rather, and then I'll kind of just amplify that frequency, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
drag it along until I hear the bit that I'm trying to find, which sounds nasty, and it'll be quite obviously terribly sounding. It'll be a lot of feedback and distortion, and then I'll just remove those little frequencies. And so it's me kind of trying to understand which parts of this audio signal sound bad. How can I
Mm-hmm.
take those sounds away and then compress it or whatever you might do after that in order to make it sound half decent? And all of that is kind of my experience of doing this kind of thing, my experience of knowing the DAW, my experience of knowing how EQ works, how expression works, how limiters work, and I'm kind of like feeling my way through it based on how it sounds.
Yeah,
How
absolutely.
how do you kind of program that into these algorithms? Like, because every voice is different, every recorded environment potentially is different, every words that people might type for you to generate the sound from is kind of different. How do you
Yeah.
determine how to treat the audio?
Yeah, that's a there's no short answer to this. So there are a couple of things here. Like one of the main advantages in the process is, of course, that AI voices are very well behaved. Yeah,
Mm,
so you don't have any in it. You don't have any in it. You don't have you don't have that
yeah,
in it, right? You
yeah.
also people rarely AI voices normally don't start screaming or talking too quiet. So first of all, that voice that voice or that already makes it very well behaved. Yeah. Of course, the ambition of this, it's kind of like, if you think about a WordPress user, right? So what you just described for audio, you're not a WordPress user, right? You're literally the guy who gets out the coding environment and writes a website from scratch with the help of the latest framework. Yeah,
Mm,
and wants to get every nuance right. So it's a very much it's a very different it's a very different ambition, right? It's a get out of jail free card rather than optimizing for the nth extent. However, having said that, there are very chunky problems that you need to solve. So, for example, we do have voice recording processes as well. So, for example, we can clone your voice. So then actually we are running into that situation that we need a guided process for you actually to first of all channel a meaningful voice, which is very hard, but then also take care of all these nuances that you just mentioned, and get the data in a automated way into a format where we can actually either um, well, worst case, reject it for the model, yeah, but also to a certain level, then actually fix it and accommodate it. And of course, that is still, even with the state of the art, is very difficult. It's a very heavy lifting on the tech side, and there's a lot of moving parts that can go wrong. Um, Maybe one more interesting thing on the AI music side, you also have very chunky problems, but AI music, it's kind of like it's a very that there's a very broad range what you can actually do with AI and music. So of course you can actually take like generative approaches where it's like literally, I think that's probably the dream of everybody. You say one keyword, right? I don't know, active and fun, and then all of a sudden you have a and 3 minute 30, and then you have a 3 minute 30 track of exactly what was in your mind. Um, that those approaches, they have some merit, but for what like the more practical applications that we are normally covering, um, they are actually too free and too freestyle. So normally you want something more, let's say, a bit more restricted, but where you actually get that AI component pretty much, let's say, rearrange or maybe iterate on certain parts. And so there are different approaches that we use. However, absolutely, it's not an easy problem to get right. And we've been very research heavy, especially the first 2 years of the company. We were entirely dedicated to R&D. And it's also AI is one beast, but then also understanding the creative process, and kind of like these decisions that you just mentioned. It's there is a human component to it, yeah, and to pretty much only also get it to sound right, it pretty much is a cross disciplinary challenge, which makes it even harder. So yes to all the things you just said. It's
Interesting. The this AI music is an interesting one because there has been examples of AI generated music, hasn't there? Is that the kind of stuff that you're talking about? Is your music pre-defined, pre-created, and then as you mentioned, you use the AI to do things like, I don't know, mix it up, create a breakdown in this part, or whatever it might be, the length of the song or whatever it might be. Like how do you describe the AI music component?
exactly, we have different approaches actually. And we also, to some extent, we also are open to integrate external voice. Sorry, we already said we are integrating external voice providers. We also open and have started to integrate external music engines, because we don't think we are still a small team of 40. So, and you can you can't build everything yourself, and especially with the product with the product philosophy we're after, we feel that the more options we have, the better it is actually for the user. And I can tell you a whole bandwidth of of applications where you get further with the one approach than the other approach. Yeah. So most of the applications that we are doing, it's fairly well defined, and hence also that AI component is fairly restricted. So it can be as restricted as that we have music stems, so like you actually would see in your DAW, and then what the algorithm does, it literally only picks up those stems, rearranges them, loops them to a certain extent, also finds variation in these stems, and then actually decides how they are arranged and rearranged. It goes all the way to freer approaches, right, where we actually say you need a 1 minute piece of audio that actually is inspired by XYZ, and then actually
Mm.
we generate that music more freely. Um, and all of these are valid, right? In the same way that if you think about voices, it's valid that you need accented voices, you need high quality voices with that have certain also capabilities to maybe be flexible when it comes to emotions, right? You need actually voices that are more robust, or that are actually can, I don't know, have a good Greek vocabulary in on top of English, right? You also need voices that are on the low end. So for example, if you have in gaming, right, you cannot tell someone, hey, you want your voice clone for a gaming application. Well, you need to find a music studio and sit there for 3 hours. Yeah.
Mm.
Also, if you clone the voice of, let's say, a CEO or someone, they might give you half an hour, right? So that's also, it's one of the most asked questions: how much time do you need to, or how much data do you need to clone a voice? It's like, well, it it, it depends, right, in terms of like
Mm.
what you want to do with it. And with AI music, with the AI music component, it's exactly the same thing. Like how free do you want it to be? Like what's the use case? And there are different routes to go.
Mm, interesting. There's a feature on Adobe Rush which is quite cool. I use Adobe Rush on my mobile for doing the vlogs and stuff like that, and I've
Mhm.
also been using it recently. I've been taking a bit more video just on a weekend, just of my son and stuff like that, and making these little videos that I've been sending to the family and stuff. And what I discovered is that they've got quite a cool little feature, but it doesn't go anywhere near as far as what you're discussing. And in fact, it actually creates a load of work, which is that you can select like a library of music, and one sample might be 15 seconds long, and it might be the whole song: drums, bass, guitar, pianos, the whole lot. But then they also have all of the elements individually. So if you just want the exact same drums, but just on their own, you can use that. Or if
Mhm.
you want the guitar on its own, you can use that. So you can assemble your own arrangement if you want to, just by using the component parts. And if
Oh,
you just
cool.
want everything in the whole song, you can have the whole song.
Mhm.
So, and I did one the other week when we've got this tent box on top of the car, and we went camping, and I did this video and stuff like that. And on the Sunday night, I was kind of just editing this video, and it must have took me about an hour to figure out to select the right music, get the right components. I wanted to kind of kick off and kind of like climax at this bit of footage, and then I wanted to
Yeah.
chill out at this bit of footage, and then I want to make sure that the images, when it's just photos, they're all kind of like transitioning on the beat and stuff like that. And it's just a massive effort. Video editing on your mobile is a huge effort. I'm assuming that what you'll say is that your kind of audio production side will streamline that process immensely. However, in order for that to even happen, there needs to be some degree of understanding about what the visual assets are, to have the images flipping and transitioning on the beat, to make sure that the music kicks off and climaxes at the right kind of part of the video. So how do you, or do you utilize other inputs like the video? And if so,
Yeah.
how does that work?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a super use case, and I'll make sure will give Adobe a call, because they should definitely use
Yeah.
use API.audio for this. And so yeah, you said some very relevant and interesting things here. So for example, transitions are something that are very important, right? So if you produce music for a video, you wouldn't kind of like start and there's a title slide, and then the main part starts. you wouldn't actually have a track that actually just goes on like this, right? There's some sort of, there needs to build an energy, yeah. In the same way that I think everybody would agree, if you write a website, you wouldn't just put it into one paragraph. You want a headline, and then you probably want a summary, and then you probably want a couple of paragraphs. Yeah.
Mm.
So most of this can be um, can be broken down into some sort of format. Yeah. And this is exactly why we're developing the solution API first, because there is no one size fits all, right? So for example, in this case, the developer would probably say, oh, so most people actually play with this and this and this way, and then actually they arrange video in scenes, which is very common, right? And then actually you say, okay, with each scene, there's probably a new narrative starting, or you can make this maybe more clear by saying, you know, I need an intro and I need a part one, part two, part three, and then a call to action. Yeah. So then actually that developer would then actually say, I sent API.audio the timestamps for these transitions, and actually on our end we would make sure the transitions are what they are. Yeah. So if they want a bit more elaborate, of course they can also say, okay, on the developer actually figures then out, hey, I have some sort of interpretation what the slideshow is about, or I let the user choose. Yeah. So for example, if you are telling us actually my sound design needs to be active, yeah, or it needs to be reflective, yeah, we can actually then also shortlist a couple of options for you, and one might resonate more with you than the other. And then actually we will do our best in the back end, or pretty much with the algorithm, to make something that actually fits this entire thing. Yeah, and paying attention to things like the transition, attention to things like the length of it, or paying attention to things like how does the voice sit on the audio, right? Do you duck it away? Do you duck the music a little bit away when the you know the music starts to give it more space and maybe go a bit forward for high energy thing, or is it maybe a, you know, something more calmer, reflective, and so on. However, again, right, so this is not for the high end, so I'm sure you also you, and probably if I hear you talk about this, me as well, probably enjoy the you know, the nitty-gritty of then actually
Yeah.
the creative process of arranging. But there's a time for everything, right? If you want to get your video done, you don't enjoy it, and if you're in a creative space where you want to play, I guess that's fun as well then, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Um, you mentioned there that this concept of creating, you know, thousands of different versions. There's a company also based in London, actually. I forget the name of it now. It's called something like what is it? Create. It's called something Create, and they have the same kind of thing. It's by a guy called Tom. I forget his name, forget the guy who runs it. Anyway, the agency does what you're describing, but they apply it to visual ads.
Hmm?
And so what they'll do is they basically will take, let's say, uh, one image that you've designed, and then we'll turn that using AI and generate 1,000 different images. They'll
Right.
then run ads to see which of those images gets the higher click through rate,
Hmm.
and then they'll optimize the whole campaign around that. Which is really interesting. And from what I've seen, they've got some really interesting results. They're getting a lot of traction. Is that the kind of thing that you're describing, but for audio?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And how
It
how
is
how
so.
does that work then?
What is commonly known, I think, as DCO, so dynamic creative optimization. So that's a very good use case for us. So you have a lot of platforms actually that allow marketeers or allow generators to do that in some sort of form, so that you actually have maybe a visual, and then maybe you have 10 different products that you want to put in one at a time. You maybe have 10 different calls to action, and then you know, by magic you create like thousands or tens of thousands of pictures, or even videos. To use AI actually to manipulate these videos on top of it is very interesting, because you have a lot of it's not even the copyright, but it's actually the algorithms online these days that actually flag copyright. So we do get a lot that people you know, even have a cleared audio track, but then actually it's a stock audio track that then they upload somewhere, and ultimately it will be blocked because someone else also uploaded this, and it's, the algorithm flags it as copyright
Mm.
protected. So that's actually that's a very relevant problem these days. So actually, and I guess this image idea is equivalent to this. So you can, of course, then use AI to pretty much manipulate that image to a extent where it varies so much that no one uploads the same image a couple of times. In the audio space, it's exactly the same thing. So we can version this asset in the audio asset in the same way they probably version then the image asset, and then actually you can run an A/B test with it, of course, see which one performs best, and then push harder on the ones that actually work. Yeah.
Mm. Interesting. And obviously, the what kind of Aflorithmic does seemingly is provide the tools to be able to do that. Do you actually run those tests as well, or do you simply give the audio to another platform that actually does the testing and the optimizing and stuff like that?
Correct. We're only focused on the production process. So our pretty much our service or our technology ends with actually putting the audio asset into a channel that works for you. Yeah.
Mhm.
However, we don't have an A/B testing engine. We don't build our own advertising platform, or we don't have any I don't know, maybe any service component attached to it or anything. It's literally about the technology of making audio production scalable to in ways you've never heard before.
Interesting. I can imagine a really good use case for something like Spotify, for example, with their digital audio advertising, whereby Spotify know who you are, and so they could quite conceivably have part of their or maybe someone could do this. I don't know. I've never advertised on Spotify, so I'm not entirely sure how it works. But I can imagine it where you could use Aflorithmic to create an audio ad that will actually address the listener by name. Hey, Kane,
Exactly.
hope you're enjoying Spotify. That last tune by whoever was fantastic. Here's something that might be relevant to you, etc. Is
Yeah.
that something that's either being used, or can you see that being used in future?
Exactly. Yeah, there are actually so since you mentioned Spotify, so there are a couple of opportunities there where that would fit quite well. So for one, Spotify has a self-serve ad builder. Yeah, so that actually means you log in. Well, you want to book advertising. You log in with a mission to book advertising. There's a form. You actually give your ad copy. Yeah, and then actually you describe. It's pretty much like a creative brief that we would give to an agency. When you press send, that entire form is actually going to it's going into a workflow for a real studio. So it takes then 48 hours for someone to sit down, do the voice recording, then actually someone to arrange it or produce it, send it back. Then you can critique it. Then actually you can say, oh, I want the voice to be more this and that. Actually, it goes back, takes another 48 hours, and so on. So pretty much the problem here is if I want to start spending money with Spotify this evening, I can't. Yeah, so I probably have a chance for sometime next week. On Facebook, no issue whatsoever. If I have $500 to spend right now, I can spend them. I can start spending them in 2 minutes. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, so what you can do now with our API now pretty much is you have that same front end, but instead of actually triggering a workflow to send it into a studio, you actually can send it to our API. You get a fully rendered audio asset back within. So advertisements on Spotify normally like 30 seconds. So that takes us 8 seconds to render. Yeah. So within 8 seconds, you actually get your audio asset back. If it's good enough, you could already air it. Yeah. But
Wow.
even though let's say you don't want the AI component, just imagine what that can do for drafting, like how much time that can cut out of this process. You might not know, is this the tone I want for the brand? You might not know, is this the do I want a younger voice, a more active voice, a female voice, a male voice, accented voice, and so on and so forth. So if you could just like do all this drafting process really efficiently in that front end, and before you send it off the first time, you already have an idea exactly what it sounds like. So that's insanely powerful.
Mm.
And the other thing, of course, what you mentioned as well. So we have um, to personalize audio assets, or actually to adjust them to the channel where they are, where they are actually broadcasted. It's also very relevant. So we've never gotten the we've never gotten good feedback from the actually mentioning your name or mention location, because people are a bit like,
It is
what's
it is a bit creepy.
what's going on. And it's a bit like display advertising, right? Sometimes it tells you, I don't know, hey London, and that's where your proxy is, and you're like, well,
Yeah, yeah.
actually I'm not in London, right? I'm in
Yeah.
Salford, right? So yeah, and so this is a bit of a hit and miss, right? But you can keep it, you can keep it very relevant. So for example, you could say now, let's say you have a mid roll in this podcast, and then actually you could actually say, hey VUX World listeners, right? All of a
Mm,
sudden it makes it very, very relevant, even though you play the same. It's not a host read, it's an advertisement that you have all over the place. Yeah. Or you actually are saying something like, you have a special of the day, right? So tonight it's the, I don't know, what are we talking about? Restaurant tonight, it's some fast food chain. Tonight it's the fish. Tomorrow it's the chicken. I don't know.
mm,
You could actually literally say, this Tuesday, go to your local XYZ in
mm,
Birmingham and try the chicken half price. Yeah,
mm,
with code XYZ. So yeah, so that's extremely powerful as well. And also content production is very relevant as well. So if you think about Spotify is very deep invested in podcasting now.
mhm,
Um, so which, I think with humans like us talking to each other will always be there. So there's not the idea, hey, let's have our AI voices speak with each other. In my mind, that doesn't make any sense. But if you think about, for example, if you have a financial news update about your portfolio and what's in your mark, or what's, let's say you have the daily, I don't know, crypto update, yeah,
mm,
or maybe the horoscope for wherever you might be born, or just something that actually renews every day and pretty much would be prohibitive for a speaker to actually do every single day. Yeah.
mm, mm,
And to actually produce that content programmatically, that is very promising indeed. So yes, so of course we're talking to all big streaming platforms. This is a very relevant, these are very relevant use cases for us.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes sense that. I mean, it almost seems as though Spotify, I mean, I don't know necessarily. I might be out of touch a little bit from where the whole kind of short form podcasting is at the moment, but I know that, Anchor got a lot of traction. That was a lot of short form kind of stuff. The flash briefings for Alexa were really popular in 2018, 2019. Spotify, obviously, since then has really, really doubling down on podcasts. But what's your take on where that kind of short form, microcasting, as it was called, is at the moment? Do you think platforms like Spotify um, are kind of moving in that direction, or what?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, so I'm a big podcast fan. I listen to a lot of podcasts. Yeah, and I think for me, short form has its base. I mean, I can just tell you a couple of things where we what we are doing, or where I think it shine, or where I see where it shines
Mm,
now. So, for example, we are doing something with a regional newspaper in Germany. Yeah. And that these are very small towns, and all of a sudden you have a daily podcast update about your town. Yeah.
mm,
And I know that works very, very well, because literally there is no competition to it, right? There is no. It's an entirely incremental, or it's an entirely new offering. Yeah.
mm,
There is no small town podcaster that podcasts every day, or so I think these things, again, where it's like it's very fast changing, it's very it's either personalized, or it's just very very niche and very targeted. I think short form has a lot of has very, very good potential here. And also At the beginning, we did a lot, or we did a lot of thinking around kind of like what potential everything synthetic can have for your way to work, because I think that is a very, very topical thing as well. So with Corona, of course, this has changed a tiny bit. So that was actually before the pandemic, but nonetheless, your way to work is also going to change if you think about how we're going to commute to work in the future, maybe with driverless cars as well. And now with earpods, everybody has their earbuds in by default and doesn't take them out and anymore. So I think that kind of like to engage with people on that commute where you only might have, you just might only want an update of 5 minutes or of 2 minutes, or might only have a podcast that is like 7 minutes. I think that has a lot of potential as well in terms of where consumer behavior is going. So yeah, I'm very much I'm very much bullish on the short-term podcast. On the other hand, I must also admit that I'm a bit out of my depth there, because literally what concepts working we see in the market, because people are building them with our tools. However, we are of course not the biggest innovators when it comes to actually conceptually work with what works. Yeah, so I must be very, very frank about this. However, as a tech layer, of course, we have a very good overview of the market and a very good overview of what people are trying and works and what people are trying and it doesn't stick.
You mentioned earlier on around kind of like synthetic voices and voice cloning and stuff like that, and content repurposing, and it being kind of like best fit for that micro kind of consumption of maybe it's like reading an article or something like that. I use Pocket. I don't know if you know Pocket. It's something like a bookmark app basically,
Yeah.
and I save articles into that, and then when I walk the dog or whatever, I'll listen to the articles, and so and it works. Pocket do it fairly well, because what they'll do is they'll have I can't remember which way around it is, but it's either a male voice or a female voice will read the headline, and then the other will read the body. So, like for example, the female might introduce the article by such and such, and then the male will read the actual article, or the other way around. That works pretty well. I've always found the issue with the synthetic voices, and this might be just because Pocket are not using high quality synthetic voices, is that they can be a bit difficult to listen to for long periods of time. And I think that might be what you were alluding to at the beginning when you were saying that it's perfect for like smaller articles rather than a whole podcast, because they don't tend to have the kind of cadence and the delivery and the up and down of the kind of the intonation and stuff like that. What's your thoughts on the current state of synthetic voices? And is it that synthetic voices will always be good for this short stuff? Or when you look at something like the Amazon newsreader voice or whatever, can you see a world where synthetic voices are easier to listen to over longer periods?
Yeah. So first of all, absolutely. I mean, the field of synthetic as such, not only the voices but also the audio automation, the AI component, and so on, it is just absolutely racing. I mean, if I now listen to demos we sent out a year and a bit ago, it's almost comical, right? So yeah, it's mind blowing how fast how fast it is going. Um, One thing I always have a hard time to explain to people that don't come from an audio world is like, and everybody in the audio world will agree with me, is audio is detail, 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 right? So the difference actually between you shutting off after 15 seconds and the difference between you subscribing to a podcast and listen to it every single day, yeah, it can be as small as having having the host have a different tone in their voice. It can be, or finding the right words, or it can be the sound design, yeah, the production, like kind of like having the right effects. Like sometimes people so some people might have heard about the loudness wars that have been going on. It's kind of like, it's pretty much the effect that if you actually just put something a bit louder than the other thing, that thing will sound much, much better to you, even though it might be the same. Yeah. And so hence, and this is something that we're really banking on, where we're also really seeing the effect that actually, if you have speech in whatever format, and you already put a production value on it that actually makes it makes it comparable to something that your ears and hence your brain is normally used to listening from radio, from podcasting, and so on. You have much better results. And it's also we got the data also to substantiate that. So we have what we're running with that German local newspaper. It's normally I want to say it's a minute and a half, and it's very nicely it's nicely produced in terms of like that has an intro jingle, and then actually you have also two voices actually interlaced with each other. You actually have a transition every time a news item starts, but also you have effects on the voice. It's mastered, yeah, and it's pretty much so it's much closer to a professional podcast than actually what you have to from a screen reader. Yeah, and I must say I love Pocket as well. I use it all the time. I do not use the reader function because I just cannot. It's not something I enjoy somehow. And I think it's two things. It's for one, it's the text is written to read. It's not written for to produce audio with. The second thing is it is just a screen reader, and we've seen a lot of screen readers that actually only do speech. So I think at the beginning you mentioned that was it Trinity Audio was at your
Yeah.
show as well. So I know actually it's also a screen reader which actually only reads the text. And actually we've compared with a German newspaper I mentioned. So we have a listen through rate and a 1.5 minute content of 85%. Yeah, and we actually ran the same thing with only speech. Yeah, and it dropped to below 50%. Yeah,
Interesting.
and that's literally the difference between someone saying, "Oh, this works, I keep it," and "Guys, this is not working. Please take it off." Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I suppose when it comes to audio production, I think what many overlook is that it is all purely psychological, isn't it? The how people perceive the audio that they're listening to is, it's kind of make or break. And that's obviously, as you'll know, but for those that don't know, what they tend to do with kind of like pop music, for example, is the chorus is ever so slightly louder than the verse. And so there's a little subconscious nudge there to
Yeah.
bring your attention back to the song if you drift away. And also sometimes they'll actually speed up the chorus by maybe 1 or 2 beats a minute just to give the a faster kind of energy. And you won't even notice it when you're listening to it, but it's all little psychological nuances that draw your attention back to the audio. And I suppose that's kind of what you're getting at there, isn't it? Is that in order to produce any kind of audio, really, but in this instance, those bite-sized clips, and I think maybe people listening who work on voice assistants and things like that, I think can learn a little bit from this as well, which is bringing the user's attention back and keeping them engaged is important.
Exactly. And I always have this one thing I always ask people. You probably know the song Despacito, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of the most successful songs of all time. It literally defined a new music genre, right? So my question is always for everybody: do you know what the second single of these guys was?
Hmm. Despacito 2? No.
So I don't know it either, right? But I heard it once, and it literally, you're right. It sounds like Despacito too. Yeah. So it was more or less the same song, but for some reason, right? The details were like checking out with Despacito, and it was the biggest song in the world, and the second single, no one took notice. Yeah. So
Interesting.
I think this really for me always drives the point home, like audio is detail, and then I always tell people to keep in mind that Metallica and the Beatles were literally the same band, right? So it was four guys, it was two guitars, a drum set, and a bass. Yeah. However,
Mm,
Metallica
interesting.
and the Beatles, I guess we all agree they couldn't be different.
Interesting. That is very yeah, they also all have the same tools, don't they? But what you produce with those tools is entirely different. Interesting. Very good. Nice one. Well, Timo, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. For those tuning in on the podcast, you can visit aflorithmic.ai, AFLORITHMIC.ai. All of the links to these will be in the show notes. And for those tuning in, you'll see that on the screen, aflorithmic.ai, for more information. Timo, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Any other resources that you would direct people to?
Yeah, API.audio. So that's actually when you are a developer listening, just give it a try. You sign up, it's free, no credit card. You can produce a professional piece of audio from code in 5 minutes. It's quite a bit of fun as well. So give it a try as well.
Perfect. API.audio. What a domain name that is. You either got in very early or paid an absolute fortune to buy that of whoever had it.
We had the right idea at the right time.
Nice, nice.
Great.
And if you're not already subscribed, please do go to vux.world/subscribe. You will get invites to these podcasts that I have with industry experts like Timo every single week. Do go to deepgram.com/VUX World to learn more about Deepgram, and go to vux.world just vux.world and click on the events tab, and you will get the landing page for our webinar that we've got coming up with Deepgram, which is called Why Your Speech Recognition is Probably a Load of Tosh and How to Fix It. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow when I speak to Frank Schneider, the CEO of Speakeasy AI, about how to properly define how to measure success for your digital assistants.